The Book of Revelation for the World Today, a chapter-by-chapter study of what God has revealed about the future. Welcome to the Book of Revelation for the World Today. We continue studying God's Word in the Book of Revelation, chapter 8, verses 7 to 13. This is about the coming disaster in nature by the hand of God as a judgment to the world. This will be a catastrophic event affecting the trees, the seas, the waters, and the stars. Before we read, let's refresh our minds about what we have already studied to better understand the context. The book of Revelation starts off in chapter 1 with John the Apostle, who is in exile because of his faith on the island of Patmos. And he sees a vision of Jesus sitting at the right hand of God on his throne. He receives instruction to write to the 7 churches in Asia, and so in chapters 2 and 3 we have the 7 letters written. In chapter 4, we find that the rapture of the saints has already taken place as we, as the church or the bride of Christ, is in heaven already represented by the 24 elders. And there we have a ceremony putting our crowns at Jesus' feet. But in chapter 5, John is in heaven, and he sees God on his throne holding the 7-sealed scroll. John cried, thinking no one existed to take the scroll to render justice and judgment because of the sins of the people on earth. All of a sudden, John is introduced to the only one that could fulfill the demands of justice against a corrupt world. And that was the Lion of Judah, or Jesus the Christ. There is a ceremony in heaven in chapter 5 where Jesus takes the scroll, and we, as the church, represented by the 24 elders, join in that ceremony and glorify God and Jesus for his worthiness. Through the book of Revelation, starting at chapter 6, the 7 seals are opened. In our text, we are at the opening of the 7th seal. And this 7th seal has 7 trumpets, and each trumpet is like a plague of judgments that the earth is subjected to because the cup of God's wrath is overflowing. While the Lord's wrath is revealed on earth, we are in heaven and we are praising him for his justice against sin. Now we can better understand the terribleness of sin as we consider the areas of a just judgment in nature. The first 4 plagues indicated are entirely inflicted on 4 areas of nature: vegetation, the sea, rivers, and lights of heaven. Let's start on the vegetation, verse 7. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the 3rd part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. This is the first time that trees are affected. In the book of Genesis, we are told that man in his disobedience took the fruit of the forbidden tree too lightly. So because of their disobedience, they were cast out of the Garden of Eden. It just seems that God's first judgment on nature refers back to the beginning of mankind and their sin in the Garden of Eden, eating of the forbidden tree. So in the first trumpet judgment, hail, fire, and blood falls upon the sky, from the sky, burning up 1/3 of all the earth's trees and all of its grass. This is an ecological disaster. The results are incalculable. To make matters even worse, John says blood was mingled with the hail and fire. These angels are here released and told to do these things as a direct will of God as a result of his justice. Now, some religions will tell you that God never punishes, but this is not true. This is punishment and judgment from God. One thing very important to remember is that the wrath of God falls on the unbelievers, not on the believers. God takes care of his children. The first trumpet judgment is so bad that it kills 1/3 of all vegetation. The tendency on the part of many expositors has been to read into this judgment as a symbol of divine chastening rather than literal hail and fire. Some looked to this judgment as if it just can't be. So they softened the words through allegorical reasoning. That is the problem with so many that read this book and don't take it literally. We know that a similar plague was found in the 10th plague in Exodus chapter 9 verses 18 to 26 on the Egyptians. And no one disputes that it was literal fire. There was literal hail and fire. And the result of the judgment here is the burning up of the third part of the trees and all green grass. There is no solid reason for not taking this judgment in its literal sense. This judgment, great as it is only the beginning. 6 more trumpets are to sound. Now, the second area in nature affected in our text is the sea. Follow along as I read verse 8. And the second angel sounded, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. Notice that what it does say, as it were a great mountain. John carefully said that it's not an actual mountain. He says, as it were. But it was a blazing mass as large as a mountain. So it is probably a huge meteor or asteroid surrounded by gases that will ignite as it enters Earth's atmosphere. Its impact will create a tidal wave, destroying 1/3 of the world's ships. As for the sea became blood, I take it to be literal blood, but this could occur in nature by what is known as red tides, caused by billions of dead microorganisms poisoning the water, and in this case it is the result of the meteor's collision to the Earth. Red tide is a common name for algae blooms, which are large concentrations of aquatic microorganisms such as protozoans and unicellular algae. The upwelling of nutrients from the sea floor often follows massive storms, provides for the algae to trigger bloom events. Now that is a natural occurring possibility. No one can say that it is not possible when we see it in nature on a small scale. Of course, it can be actual blood, a clear act of eschatological judgment. As a result, 1/3 of every living thing in the sea dies, and 1/3 of the ships on the sea are destroyed. In his book, The Late Great Planet Earth, Tim LaHaye describes what happens in a nuclear holocaust. He states that in a nuclear detonation, humidity in the air is instantly compressed into water and driven straight up into the freezing temperatures of the upper stratosphere. It then is instantly frozen and falls back to Earth as giant chunks of ice. This, he states, would account for the fire, blood, and ice. Not to mention, countries who now have nuclear capabilities, it makes this certainly a possibility. Imagine the super polluted air with radiation, and now with 1/3 of all vegetation gone, the lack of oxygen, 1/3 of all the fish in the sea are cut off or die, and the third part of the ships are destroyed. I mentioned the fact that the trees were hit, possibly because Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden tree in the garden. They sinned and were afraid, and to restore fellowship, the next thing that occurred was blood that was shed so that Adam and Eve could be covered in the sight of God. The second trumpet has blood all over the 1/3 of the earth. It's like reading the book of Genesis in the light of grace And here in Revelation, the same thing, but in the light of God's wrath. The next judgment on nature affects the waters. Verses 10 and 11. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So, if the tree refers to the forbidden tree and the blood refers to the sacrifice, then the water refers to the water of life. It's as if the Lord is saying that He offered the water of life in order that man live a life of abundance in Him. But refusal to drink the water of life has only one bitter consequence, and that is to drink the bitter waters of refusal. He said it many times that those that do not believe in Him will be deceived and will believe a lie. When the third trumpet sounds, John witnesses a great star burning like a lamp, falling upon rivers and fountains of water. It is named wormwood and causes the water to be bitter, resulting in the death of many. According to some authors, the star called wormwood is understood to be another meteorite, crashing to the earth, burning like a torch. It falls on a third of the earth's rivers and springs, turning them bitter and poisonous. Remember how the Chernobyl disaster polluted so much water by a single nuclear incident? The one interesting thing is that Chernobyl is the Russian word for wormwood. This accident that occurred in Russia affected mostly communist countries, those who denied God. It had a terrible immediate effect of fallout in many of the neighboring countries. Literally, thousands of people were filled with cancer-causing fallout. In some places, the radiation was thousands of times the normal amount. All of this speaks of terrible things associated with such an upheaval in the earth that it is beyond our comprehension. Let's not forget, though, this is God's righteous way in dealing with the accumulated sin and corruption on earth, which only broadens our view of how terrible sin must be. It lets us see a little better how sin is so terrible and how it deserves terrible judgment. The fourth trumpet judgment affects the lights in the heavens. The lights in heaven, verses 12 and 13. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of the heavens, saying, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. This judgment is one of darkness. The Lord Himself plunges man into physical darkness, just like they chose spiritual darkness. The God who created light in the first place is able to diminish it to 1/3. Actually, the day and the night are affected and things will seem different, for there will be 16 hours of darkness and 8 hours of daylight. This naturally reminds us of a plague sent on Pharaoh, as described in Exodus chapter 10, verse 21. The world is warned of the judgment to come. The trumpet judgments confirm the predictions of Christ and the Old Testament prophets of the coming time of tribulation, far worse than anything the human race has ever experienced before. The first 4 trumpets deal with aspects of the physical world which are taken more or less for granted. The beauty and benefits of the trees, the luxury and growth of green grass are just taken for granted. Don't they realize God created it? In a similar way, men are prone to take for granted the blessings of water, whether it be the beauty of the sea, the majestic flow of great rivers, or the pure fountains and springs which abound in the natural world. Then there's the blessings of light from the sun, moon, and stars. The judgments in our text are evidence of the power and sovereignty of God over these things. Corrupt men on earth can no longer ignore the fact that God will be dealing with them. Though it is difficult in this day of grace to imagine such catastrophe, the Word of God is plain. And men are called everywhere to turn to God and His grace before it is too late. As Christians, we are to be occupied in view of our heavenly home that is promised to us through salvation. The wrath of God is coming. Though we will be in heaven to see these terrible judgments, we are here right now on earth, and our responsibility is to share the gospel and warn the lost of the coming judgment described in this book. As we learn more about Jesus, we will learn how to better serve Him. So stay with us as we journey through this book. Until next time, may God bless you and make you a blessing. Maranatha.